European leaders outraged this morning over President Trump's latest move in his bid for control of Greenland. President Trump threatening a 10% tariff on 8 European countries that oppose his play to seize the Arctic island. Denmark's prime minister saying in response, quote, "Europe won't be blackmailed." And there's a new twist this morning with the Norwegian prime minister's office releasing a text message President Trump sent yesterday tying his moves on Greenland to his Nobel Peace Prize snub. Let's bring in MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Joel Rubin. Good to see you both. David, let's start with the new tariff threats. Can the president do this? What is the legal justification for these new tariffs?
So there's a 1977 law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act that the president has cited here. He's used this, invoked this to launch this whole tariff war that he started many months ago. It's right now being considered by the U.S. Supreme Court, but it's unclear if the Supreme Court will sort of come out and decisively say he doesn't have this power. The legal question is there an emergency happening right now? And so yesterday in an interview on NBC News, Secretary Scott Bessent tried to describe the legal rationale for this. Have a listen.
The national emergency is avoiding a national emergency, that it is a strategic decision by the president. This is a geopolitical decision, and he is able to use the economic might of the U.S. to avoid a hot war. So why wouldn't we do that? You know, same thing. That what if we had a national emergency coming with these gigantic trade balances that we had with the rest of the world? I've been in financial markets for 30, 45 years. Much better to be strategic, avoid the emergency.
So what's extraordinary there is that there's no indication that there's an emergency here.
Right. What's the imminent threat?
So Russia is not threatening to invade Greenland. Russia invaded Ukraine and has its hands full there. The people have invoked China. A European official said a few days ago that there's been no Chinese ships near Greenland for years. So it's again a theme of this presidency. The president having the sweeping power to just unilaterally announce these tariffs, not relying on Congress in so many ways. But the key issue here is just the facts. There isn't any emergency national security threat. I've talked to members of Congress, intelligence officials. There is no imminent Russian invasion of Greenland. This is all seems to be being created by the president so he can buy Greenland. And then lastly, it's just basic democracy. Don't the residents of Greenland get to decide what country they live in versus this just being bought by another nation?
And not to mention, it's a NATO ally.
If it was invaded, all NATO allies would have to defend Greenland.
We're also learning this morning, Joel, that President Trump sent a message to Norway's prime minister, his office releasing a message that said, quote, "Considering your country decided not to give me the Nobel Peace Prize for having stopped 8 wars, plus, I no longer feel an obligation to think purely of peace." That's apparently what President Trump sent to Norway. MS Now has reached out to the White House. In response, Norway's prime minister explained that the Nobel Peace Prize is awarded by an independent committee, not the Norwegian government. So he's threatening tariffs, blaming not getting a Nobel Prize. What's your reaction to this?
Anna, look, this just frankly exposes the whole truth of this whole discussion, which is that Greenland for Donald Trump is nothing more than a vanity project. It is not a national security issue, to David's point. To your point about imminent threat, look, this reminds me of Iraq, when we had Condoleezza Rice going on TV saying, we don't want to be the victims of a mushroom cloud, a nuclear weapon going off. Therefore, we need to invade Iraq. So therefore, we don't want at some point down the road Russia or China to take Greenland. Therefore, we need to essentially raise prices on Americans and raise their costs by enacting sanctions against our allies in order to prevent something that may happen down the road. So it's really offensive. It counters logic. And it demonstrates once again that the whole Greenland policy is nothing more than a vanity project.
NATO's Secretary General said he spoke with President Trump about Greenland. He looks forward to seeing him in Davos this week, where they believe Greenland will be a major issue. We've also learned today NATO and the Secretary General's meeting with Danish and Greenlandic officials. Joel, what is this doing to the NATO alliance? Has damage already been done?
It's shredding it. And, this is like a dream scenario for Vladimir Putin. He could not have mapped this out better. The script from Moscow has been followed exquisitely. The idea that an American president would essentially be threatening another NATO member ally in Denmark, causing our other allies in France and Britain and Germany and others to be scared for their country's futures and undermine the whole concept of NATO's collective defense. This is just only going to exacerbate tensions right now at a time when we have major international crises, including the war in Ukraine, which, by the way, is still ongoing, and we need our allies to resolve it. So this is nothing but counterproductive and undermining American national security.
Are you surprised that these European nations aren't trying to hit back, saying that they would have retaliatory tariffs, for example, against the U.S.? And how do you see these conversations in Davos going?
Yeah, look, Anna, this is clearly something that's now percolating out into the media. Europe has, it's our largest trading partner, the European Union. We could be on the receiving end of their sanctions. This is high risk. And for the American people, this is where the dots get connected. These international forays, these international initiatives by the president, they can have real costs. And if the Europeans decide to enact sanctions on us as a result of these threats, our prices will go up. Affordability will become something that the president will probably talk about. And we're going to see the American people suffer for no appreciable gain. Remember, these are our allies. And to David's point, Greenland is within NATO under Denmark. If it were attacked, not only could we fight against that, but also we would have these allies with us. So the benefit here is to nobody in the United States. It's to Vladimir Putin. And frankly, it's undermining global confidence in our country.
David, Trump's threats are sparking bipartisan condemnation here at home. We saw Senator Thom Tillis put out a statement calling all of this absolutely stupid or beyond stupid. Senator Lisa Murkowski warning these threats play directly into Putin's hands and force America's NATO allies to divert attention to resources to Greenland. So what can Congress do about this?
Congress has the power of the purse. Congress enacted in the National Defense Authorization Act earlier this year that U.S. troop levels in Eastern Europe could not drop below a certain level. So there is ways to do this, and I think Congress could be creative and come up with some way to hold back money, and that might get the administration to respond. And I just want to echo, if Europe responds on tariffs, it's American consumers that are paying for this. They will be paying higher prices for this obsession with Greenland. You
mentioned that the tariffs that he's now threatening against Europe would use essentially the same justification or legal reasoning as he has used for the sweeping tariffs that are currently before the Supreme Court that have been overruled by lower courts already. So would this decision at the Supreme Court end up impacting this new threat?
It could, and it just depends on whether we get a clear ruling from the Supreme Court saying, and it could be a clear ruling saying this is legal, the president has the power. That would vastly expand a president's power, or they could say this is legal and this would rein him in. It's another civics lesson for Americans. Will Congress rein in a president? Will the courts, are these three co-equal branches of government or not? Donald Trump is acting like there is one branch that's more powerful than the other two.